Hello, watching this video will take 60 minutes of your time and leave you with a bunch of useless information about Breath of the Wild that I'd sure as hell be excited about if I were in your shoes. Let's go. It's been established that you can't pet dogs in this game, but they sometimes randomly give off little pink clouds of affection just for being near you. And if you put away your weapon and press Y or R, Link will do this little animation where he tries to pull out his weapon and then he looks confused because he didn't pull anything out. If you do this next to a dog until it lets out one of these little pink clouds of affection, then it'll give this nice little illusion that you're actually petting the dog. Whenever the game gets confused about elixirs, specifically if it thinks a regular cooked meal with no special properties is an elixir, it'll turn it into a cute little ice cream cone. Several players randomly discovered and documented this in the early days after the game's release, but it wasn't understood back then. When Nintendo realized players were experiencing this, they quickly patched the glitch. Today we understand the game much better, and not only can we work around that patch, but we also know exactly how to trick the game up with a simple cooked meal and an elixir with a glitch known as inventory slot transfer, aka the infinite stuff trick, or IST for short. Fellow YouTuber Futurelander made a quick how-to video that I've linked in the description just in case you want to take Link down to the beach or somewhere and give him a snack on a hot summer day. When Link is out of stamina, he can still do a charged spin attack, he's just slower like everything else when you're out of stamina. He'll give it all he's got, which isn't much, and the animation has him stumbling around, kinda reminiscent of the way that he stumbles around right before he falls in the memory cutscene. The translucent terrain that Link cannot climb on in Hebra Mountain is not a glacier or ice material as I mistakenly referred to it in the 30-minute video. It's glass created from incinerated rock from a stray Divine Beast laser beam shot that cooled down rapidly out here in the climate. Makes sense because glass is one of the few things that Link cannot climb up in this game, so at least they stayed consistent. If you run around while wearing one of Kilton's monster masks, Link makes noises that mimic those of each monster. The Bokoblin, Moblin, and Lionel all have distinct grunts, while the Lizalfos makes the iconic croaking sound. The grunts are subtle and easy to miss, but the Lizalfos noises are slightly more audible. People have used the Hero's Path feature to create artwork, but most of the Google search results I got were inappropriate to show in this video. I wanted to try my hand at something creative, but the learning curve and time consumption are a bit more than I'm looking to get into right now. But I did try to write the word thanks, as in thanks so much for your support of this ridiculous series. Maybe someday I'll draw something cool with Hero's Path, but for now all I've done is run a perfect circle around Calamity and Dark Beast cannons just to see how it looks. I mean, they're perfect circles. One is way more enormous than the other, but what else could you expect? There are several methods you could use to clip through the magic force field wall and leave the Dark Beast Ganon fight early. Nintendo didn't expect people to figure this out, so the game works differently out here. The music is repetitive, and the shrines are programmed to be invisible for some reason. They're still there, they're just hidden. Certain bridges, too, which makes traveling across them a little bit surreal. Enemies programmed to always be in the same place won't spawn, but enemies programmed to spawn randomly in a general area still will. You can't interact with NPCs, meaning that you can frolic through Magda's flower garden all day, but some NPCs can still interact with you, so you can't go hang out in Gerudo Town wearing whatever clothes you want Link to wear because the guards will pop in to say no and then pop right back out. If you leave the fight when you only have that final shot left to deal, the music will be extra repetitive and the sky becomes perpetually ominous. If you get too far off the ground in this state, it gets redded out down there and hard to see through the malacey fog. Standing back far enough, we can see the glow from the battle arena reaching high into the sky, and this halo band around it moves to stay level with Link. If you go to the castle or just too far away in general, Dark Beast will despawn and the music will stop, but that doesn't mean that the game forgot your unfinished business. Oh, and what I said about NPCs applies to Calamity too. Since he's supposed to already be dead, if you go back to the Sanctum, you'll see the floor leading to the Astral Observatory is open, but once you go to get a good look, you're essentially soft-locked until you reset. And finally, you can fire light arrows through this barrier, so if you want to shoot Dark Beast from way back, you can pull off as long a shot as you're able with the right vantage point and stamina management. But suppose you want to take a look below at the Astral Observatory during your Blights fights. In that case, it's possible to get to the Sanctum so fast that the floor doesn't fully load, so you can walk over the hole and peer down at the shaft to where you're supposed to get it on with Calamity. Walking around on this glass floor looking setup is pretty trippy, but it's more luck than anything else if you're trying to replicate this one at home. Sometimes, super rarely, it happens. Sometimes, 99.9 repeating of course the rest of the time, it doesn't. Now, I've definitely talked about the speedrunning community in this series, still I have yet to talk more about the Glitch Hunters, an active group of dedicated Zelda fans trying to further understand and break this game in various ways. That said, there's a really super duper excellent project work in progress that, at the time of this recording, is only 16.875% complete, and it's called BotW Decompilation. Its purpose is to better understand game internals, aid with glitch hunting, and document existing knowledge in a permanent, unambiguous form which helps further reverse engineer the game. This is considered a giant Zelda puzzle in and of itself that some people consider fun. If you're one of those types of people, and you're also familiar with basic software development practices, mainly C++, which is what Breath of the Wild is written in entirely, or another language with object-oriented aspects like Java or Python, you should reach out and see what they need help with working on next. More info is in the video description. I've already named a few bridges and areas around the map that are references to previous Zelda stuff, but there are so many more. The Manhala Bridge is named after Manhandala, a four-mouth boss from the original game. Then there's the Karak Bridge, named after Karak, a giant evil wizard. The Helmhead Bridge, named after Helmet Head. The Orsed Bridge, named after Horsehead. And the Raybane Bridge, named after Raybonak. All bosses from Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, and all in the same area or downstream from each other. And yes, all named slightly off, but it's not a stretch. The Riverside Stable is near 3 more bridges that are named directly after the 3 teachers from the Knights Academy in Skyward Sword: Owlin, Horwell, and Aegis. Then there's Oren Bridge, spanning the Zora River, which is named directly after Queen Oren from A Link Between Worlds. The Rutella Dam, the Rutella River, and the Release Pond are all named after Queen Rutella and her son Prince Release from Twilight Princess. Rutella and Rutala are off by 1 letter in the spelling between the character and the places, and Release is spelled exactly the same for the prince and the pond, even though it's more like Release Swamp. There are even some lakes north of Zoro's domain named after characters from Majora's Mask. There's Lulu Lake, named after the lead singer of the Indigogos, and Mikau Lake, named after their lead guitarist, not to mention Toto Lake, named directly after the band's manager. The music inside each divine beast has a subtle tapping of Morse code in the background. You can hear the ... pattern repeating if you listen closely enough. But other curious things I don't see discussed as much are that the divine beast themes all speed up around 1 minute in, and then they change even more sped up or dramatically towards the end. So they come in ominous, change to reflect the stress of the champions fighting for their lives, and then change once more to reflect the impending doom they all 4 succumb to. And the SOS calls come in from each Ruda, Rudania, and Naboris right at the start of the Divine Beast theme, and are constant throughout, and they become more frantic as the song progresses. The call from Rudania comes in first before any actual music even begins, and Ruda and Naboris come in immediately following an instrumental fade-in from Ruda and a crash from Naboris. The call from Meadow, however, doesn't occur until 16 seconds into the Va Meadow track. His signals are significantly fainter, possibly not even constant, as if Mipha, Urbosa, and Daruk all sent out their distress signals at the first sign of, well, distress, while Rivali may have had trouble asking for help. And if you listen really close, you can also hear the Morse code call for SAD, S-A-D, seek and destroy. This one sounds different, and it has been theorized that it's radio interference from the Blight Ganons acting out on their commands. Whether or not these background sounds are supposed to be the actual distress and command signals being sent before the champions met their end on board the Divine Beasts, or if it's just an extra auditory effect thrown in there to set the mood for these locations is unclear. Still, it's exciting to see these things in there, to say the least. If you do a neutral shield jump and then perfectly time your X presses to jump again as you hit the ground, you can do a shield bounce. And if you do this repeatedly in a spot with snow or sand where the shield receives no damage, you can jump on your shield like a pogo stick indefinitely. My record is 10. I wanted to do a little bit better than that, but it's double digits, so I'm happy with it for now. This here is a detailed step-by-step map of the current 100% completion route as of the making of this video. It breaks down the game into 2,977 individual steps. This includes setting up the Omega Bow and inventory slot transfer glitches. As you can see, it's an extraordinarily detailed and well thought out route. If you're interested in learning Breath of the Wild Hundo, a link to the map is in the description so you can zoom in to get the true usefulness out of this one. This symbol is unique to the Lurlin village area. It's similar but distinct from the Zonai symbol. You can see it on huts, and the wooden crates here also have these designs on them, along with some other artwork which is a feature exclusive to this area as far as my research has taken me. Lurlin also has unique boats designed to look like whales, a reoccurring theme throughout the Zelda series. For example, these giant skeletons in the Hebra, Eldin, and Gerudo areas all look like whales or giant fish. They belong to creatures known as leviathans, but based on their skulls, they're all distinct species. Theories on who or what these could have been are Lord Jabu Jabu from Ocarina of Time, Lord Jabun from Wind Waker, the Sky Whale from Phantom Hourglass, the Windfish from Link's Awakening, and or Levias from Skyward Sword. But not only these creatures left behind giant remains, so what's up with the other colossal monster fossils around the map? This one-of-a-kind skull with horns in the bottomless swamp is particularly curious, or the skulls all over the map where enemies use them for forts. Whose heads are those? Off the top of mind, the closest thing these skulls match would be a creature like the giant Goron from Ocarina of Time. The one with the horns, I have no idea who that could have been, but are we to assume that they were all benevolent creatures because blood moons don't revive them the way a stall enemy would? So whatever. But speaking of giant monsters, in the 20-minute video, I mentioned the logo from the Goron stuff and called it a Dodongo footprint. A few of you pointed out that it's not a Dodongo footprint, that it's the Goron's ruby spiritual stone from Ocarina of Time. So I went and I checked Zeldapedia, and y'all are indeed correct. This crest of the Gorons is a stylized depiction of the second spiritual stone. Darunia has it tattooed on his arm, and Daruk has it on the buckle or clasp on the strap across his chest. But then that got me thinking more about Dodongo footprints, and I already knew about these giant impressions walking all around Death Mountain. I just always assumed that they belonged to Barudanya, but after a comparison, I see that they do not match Brudanya's foot. So whose footprints are these? Among other things, the game is rated E10+ due to mild, suggestive themes. That said, I find these stone offering statues around Hyrule extremely suggestive. However, they're not an intended part of that suggestiveness, but instead more likely just super unfortunate design. Now, I won't flat out say it here, but I can't unsee what I've seen, and I know I'm not alone. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about right now, congratulations on having an uncorrupted mind. This is either a poor design choice or an instance where someone on the development team slipped in something naughty, pun intended, and it got past the ESRB. The first ever submitted and accepted speedrun of this game included a pee break in the middle of it and was done by a runner named Seth Bling, who got a time of 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 47 seconds on the 3rd of March 2017, the day the game came out. And as much of a humongous accomplishment as that is, we must also remember that the game did leak and some people were able to find a way to play it early. His time was bested by nearly an hour the very next day by another runner named Venick with a time of 1 hour, 24 minutes, and 7 seconds, which is the most amount of time this game has ever or will ever be brought down by a single run for a new world record in the any percent category if you rearrange the words to the full title of the game while not leaving any words out. There's one alternative order that still makes grammatical sense, although it doesn't have nearly the same ring to it, and it certainly doesn't sound fun. I'm talking, of course, about The Legend of The Wild Breath of Zelda. The number 4 recurs throughout the game. You begin by completing your first 4 shrines to get your 4 primary runes and your first 4 spirit orbs, and 4 is how many it takes to trade in for an extra heart or piece of stamina. There are 4 divine beasts piloted by one of the 4 champions who each represent the 4 main character types in the game. Human, Goron, Zora, and Rito, and were each killed by one of the four Blight Ganons. Yet, still, the four living descendants are filling their shoes the best that they can, and the time on Tingle's necklace watch is frozen at 4 o'clock. You can upgrade your clothing items to 4 stars by reactivating power from the 4 great fairies, and Hudson asked for 4 different people whose name ends in Sun to help build Terrytown. I probably missed something. I mentioned in the 20-minute video that the meaning of the ancient sea in the rock salt description refers to Wind Waker, but y'all have let me know that that's somewhat contested, with the other major candidate being the Lanayru Sea from Skyward Sword, the most ancient sea of them all. You can create some relaxing, balanced rock art by jumping in place and dropping bombs with the proper timing to perfectly balance a square bomb on top of a circle, or vice versa. Square on top is a bit more tricky and thus more impressive. My best advice is to choose a controlled environment. Basically, anywhere indoors works. While hanging out in Hyrule Castle, once you've reached a certain proximity to Calamity in the Sanctum, a hazy, malicey fog will take over the sky. From Zelda's room, you're right about at that height. If you go to her second floor, it gets real malicey outside, but if you hop back down, it'll clear up. This effect is activated and deactivated by crossing a threshold that stretches flat across the whole entire castle area. One of the steps in the process to completing the weapon smuggling glitch is to throw an item, which makes the weapon in Link's hand get yoinked back into his palm like a yo-yo or a trick gag thing on a string, if you know what I mean. It's a goofy animation we're treated to while the game fumbles around not knowing what to do, and on top of that, you can pull out your bow and make it look like Link is getting ready to fire his entire weapon at the next unlucky bad guy that he sees. But don't worry, he will not fire any one- or two-handed weapons with the bow, but it would be kind of sweet. A quick comparison of star fragments from this game to gratitude crystals from Skyward Sword shows that these two items look way too similar for it not to be intentional. I'm not saying that star fragments are gratitude crystals, just that by design choice, there's either inspiration being drawn or references being made here by the team at Nintendo. I mentioned in the 10-minute video that the game won't give you a blood moon before you leave the Great Plateau, but it's more accurate to say that the game isn't supposed to give you a blood moon before you leave the Great Plateau. See, there's this thing called panic blood moons where the game will randomly freak out and give you a blood moon during the day or earlier at night, whenever really. It's rare, but it's real. Pressing down on the D-pad while holding items will toggle between dropping them at your feet or tossing them out in front of you. You might think this sounds like a useful gameplay tip, but I played this game for nearly 6 years before I realized this was a thing, so it's not critical. I can't even think of a single thing that you can do with a toss that you can't accomplish with a drop, except maybe feeding wildlife without scaring them off, which is one of the most impractical ways you can spend your time while playing this game. And on that note, for years I thought you had to drop the apples to get horses to eat them, but they'll eat right out of your hand, and apparently the team at Nintendo had tons of ideas for what horses could do that never made the cut. Imagine your horse nuzzling Link's cheek, popping its head through a window whenever Link goes inside, or swaying gently with the in-game music. Oh, we do have that one meme where the horse is swaying to the music, which is probably the closest we'll ever get. And if you ride the Lord of the Mountain, you'll see that this creature has 5 spurs of stamina boost speed up power, but the spurs replenish so quickly it only needs the 1, so you could run the Lord at a constant sprint, mashing A as fast as you can, and you'll still only ever use 1 spur. So the other 4 have no purpose other than to eliminate any confusion the player might have when they first mount this thing about how much giddy up and go it has. Also, while I was doing research for this series, I heard that you could feed it like a regular live horse. And yes, indeed, even though the Lord of the Mountain is a metaphysical being, it will still eat apples right out of your hand just like a real live horse. And stall horses will do it too, but it'd be way funnier if when they eat the apples, if they plop down back on the ground underneath them and I could pick them back up. But there is some comic relief to be had if you feed a stall horse up until 5 a.m. as it goes from night to morning, then it'll look like you poisoned the undead horse, and I'm sure Melania would have something to say about this. When you defeat Dark Beast Ganon, you go into one of those cutscenes with Zelda where it shows Link interacting with what you were last seen wearing. And so Link is always shown in this cutscene approaching Princess Zelda wearing those items, including the Bow of Light, as things should be, right? Follow me here, because if Link does not have any other weapons, shield, shirt, or pants equipped when you would defeat Dark Beast Ganon, but he does still have the Bow of Light equipped, Link will be shown approaching Princess Zelda completely stripped down to his boxer briefs, without even the Bow of Light, as if you saved Hyrule in nothing but your underwear. Although you can wear hats and this will still work, at least the Cap of the Wild. And if you switch to any other regular in-game bow after firing the final shot to Dark Beast's eye, but before the arrow connects in nothing but your underwear, Link will be shown approaching Zelda with that bow equipped along with the quiver and arrows. So when Link shows up wholly stripped down, instead of having the Bow of Light equipped, you know the developers purposely made that a thing for when you finish the game with nothing but the Bow of Light. Or maybe a hat. If you hold X to do a Revali's Gale while Link is carrying a weapon, and then instead of launching, unequip your weapon with the quick menu and cancel the Gale with B. Link will stay hunched over kinda like a zombie, or as if he's just extremely exhausted. It's actually kind of a primate-like posture, which is also pretty funny because there's a speedrunning meme category called Become Monkey %, where you literally play from the start of a new game and as fast as you can go to crouch and eat a bunch of bananas while listening to the sound of monkeys in the background. 3 Hyrulean languages can be deciphered or transliterated into English: Hylian, Sheikah, and Gerudo, suggesting that Link is trilingual because when conversing with NPCs, they're speaking in one of those 3 regional Hyrulean languages, and the game translates it into a real-life language of your choice because Link can understand them. Written communication is a uniquely human thing, as the anthropomorphized rock, fish, and birds don't have their own written languages, at least in this game. But for some reason, the Hylian text, aka the main language of Hyrule, has duplicate letters: F and R, O and Z, J and T, E and W, D and G. What? Why, Nintendo? Other languages don't do that. Just make one an upside down version of another, or backwards, or an upside down backwards variation for a few, and boom, it's acceptable. But they could have also just made the letters more close to their Latin counterparts, because many of the symbols already look a lot like actual letters anyway. In the 10-minute video while deciphering Kilton's sign, I thought Hylian was just a visually decipherable code because you can visually make out that it says Savage Swaps, even if the E and the W are the same. But does this above the goddess statue really say Buffet? No, wait, it says Pray. Can you see the difference? I can't. It's unclear why the primary language of Hyrule would be the one with the least amount of effort put into it, but we are talking about fake languages and alphabets right now after all. That said, here's a few translations of some of the more amusing things I've come across while researching for this series. The Hylian text on the ruins of the fountain in Central Square reads, "On this day, the king opened this structure to the public." It says the same exact thing on the plaques behind the bird statues facing northeast from the edge of the Great Plateau. If you've never taken the time to look up when you first enter the Yiga hideout, you probably missed the fact that the 7 heron statues have replicas in this room. In between them, there's a Gerudo text that says, "Gerudo, there is no strife, Gerudo like water." An interesting side note is that the Yiga have blindfolded these statues with their signature upside-down Sheikah logo, an interesting symbolic gesture. And the real 7 heroine statues themselves out in the desert are labeled as the 7 Sages, a title Zelda enthusiasts will find familiar. But what about the 8th heroine? Remember that one? What does the text found on this statue translate to? Nothing. The 8th statue is partially unfinished, the sword is completely absent, and it has not been engraved with any Gerudo text or a symbol on the sandals to dictate which pedestal you put the ball into. I like to think there's no huge mystery here and that it's just a spare. The milk bottles in the Hitano General Store say Lon Lon on them, and the cowhead logo matches the Ocarina of Time logo exactly. However, the Hylian text between the 2 games differs. Karen plops down in the living room and materializes a book out of nowhere to pass the time while it rains in Hitano. She'll always stare at the same page, and you can surprisingly make out what it says. Once upon a time, there lived a prince. One day, on his way to the castle, a strange thing happened. This goes with an illustration of a blonde guy with a sword and a blue top wearing a crown while riding a white horse along a winding path that leads to the castle in the distance. I waited the whole storm to be positive that this is all that happens around here, and it is, but if it starts raining right before bedtime, they'll all migrate to the bedroom. But like I said before, they will not go to sleep unless you camera blind them. In Chef Ori Tamu's house in Gerudo City, she has two books with different information about cooking. Supposedly, Volume 1 you could read just fine. Volume 2, however, is up on the countertop, and they make this either tall or short joke about how the book is up too high to read. But if Link really wanted to, he could grab that down. It's not out of arm's reach. Don't worry, I got you. The text and illustration in all cookbooks is exactly the same. They all say April 1st, today was a dry, hot, and sunny day. I went to school. This diary is very important document. It's not even grammatically correct, but it's a perpetual April Fool's Day joke, so who cares? Page 2 says how to cook. The hylian hang tags on Goron spice bottles say spice, but there's a finer print that's too fine to see. The Sheikah text seen on the floor throughout shrines says move on with an exclamation point and or a dash depending on, I assume, how many tiles developers needed to make these paths lay out symmetrically. It'll sometimes say move, move, move on, or some variation to have the paths go out longer and so on. And the text inside the monk boxes says goal point, because that's what it is. Some signs, like the one at Shatterback Point or ones near Kilton, say read me, while others, like the one at Top Death Mountain, say info. The welcome mats found out in front of village stores are supposed to say welcome, except in Kakariko village, where the clothing store, the general store, and the inn all have the textures accidentally mirrored, so technically they say Imoklu, but with the letters backwards. In Kakariko, the grocery store is the only one that has a properly programmed welcome mat. Inside the Hitano Ancient Tech Lab, there's some Sheikah text on the wall that says shutter, apparently some custom interior decor. Also, on top of the roof, there's this cute little Sheikah frog with glasses and an umbrella, and there's also a giant telescope. While we're on the subject, the Akala Lab also has something on top that's probably a modified telescope that Robbie created, although the lens is odd and there is no eyepiece, making it generally curious looking. The hylian text on the sign at Link's house says Master Link, and the fine print in the corner says presented by Sakurada Builders. Sakurada or Sakurada being the Japanese name for Bolson. Cloyne here is the owner and operator of the Lurelin Village Casino, which is named Chance All or Nothing. He's here in case you ever want to get lucky, and yes, that's what this banner inside transliterates to. Besides gambling, Cloyne's main hobbies are reading and knocking back noble pursuits. And yeah, those are definitely noble pursuits. How did he get those all the way over here? It is a mystery. The Thunderhelm pedestal says Gerudo brilliant in the sun. And then there's this 3-pillar poem that we can only complete by reading the exact copy upstairs in Riju's bedroom, because her pillows down here to boost her up on the throne cover up one word of this poem, which reads, we stand vigilant in the desert sun, we are brilliant over everyone. Gerudo, a resilient desert flower, facing the sun's gaze. Gerudo grows brilliant while others fade, vigilant in the sun, growing brilliant Gerudo, never outdone. After deciphering all these the hard way, I found a link to every known code breakdown in the game. If you want it, it's in the description. And by the way, depending on what language and or region you set your system to, the cover art will be affected. The Americas, Japan, China, Taiwan, and South Korea regions all get this one, while Europe, Australia, and New Zealand all get this one. 3 out of the 4 languages that don't use the Latin alphabet will write the game title in that language if you set your system to it. The other will keep it in English. Not including HD, 3D, DX remakes, anniversary editions, or restylizations, nor spin-offs like the Hyrule Warrior series, Tingle games, weird 90s stuff, random mid-2000s stuff, or early Game & Watch versions. Breath of the Wild is only the 19th Zelda game to ever come out, and obviously it did a lot of things for the first time, or for the first time in a while. For example, when you analyze the logo and compare it to the other logos from the 18 13 previous Zelda titles, it's the first time since A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening that we see the Master Sword coming straight down vertically and weaving between the Z and Zelda. Also, as you can see, the Master Sword is the actual sword, while everything else is a solid color or silhouette, including the flower. This detail is reflected in the little loading icon in the bottom right corner of the loading screens. The lettering and the silent princess are all solid, while the sword is outlined with finer details drawn inside. And just in case you weren't already aware, the silent princess growing out of the Z is a symbolic representation of a connection between the flower and the human. You get it? The silent princess? You see, they're both princesses, but the silent princess is another nod to the series' history, as Breath of the Wild is the first one to give Zelda a voice. And very likely due to that fact, this is the first game in the series to prevent players from changing Link's name to whatever they want at the start of a new game. Think about it, Zelda calls out to Link specifically right off the bat. Among other various early ideas, one of the ways Nintendo initially set out to break the series conventions was to have UFOs invading Hyrule, abducting cattle, and raining down hellfire of lasers from the sky. But I'm telling you right now, that wouldn't have just broken traditions, that would have obliterated them with an Illudium Q36 explosive space modulator. A little overkill if you know what I mean. So I'm glad they toned it down from there. One tool developers used to make Link and NPCs pop a little more against the backdrops was to use a technique called rim lighting, where you see a subtle highlight around the outer rim of the character models. To get the best results for comparison, you can move the camera in close enough to Link that it makes him start fading away, and then push it back out again. As you go back and forth, pay attention to the lighting around Link's edges, and you'll see the rim lighting activating and deactivating. The four divine beasts were known originally as the four great relics, and there was much debate on how they should be portrayed. The team knew they wanted each one to be a different animal, but needed to figure out how to depict them properly. According to art director Satoru Takezawa in Creating a Champion, the walking animation for Vonaboris was to look as though the camel was a costume with people in front and back. And wildlife artist Ayashida said Naboris was designed to look like it was a camel, but drawn by someone who never actually had seen a camel. These ideas helped make the divine beast feel ancient and unsettling, yet one of the biggest complaints among Zelda enthusiasts I've heard is not the beast's exterior design, but that it is the interior that needs more variety or theming. Sure, they all look like different animals from the outside, but they look like little more than intricate shrines on the inside. It's a fair point, I get it. Let's move on. So of course they were inspired by real-life animals, but they weren't the only ones. Mifa is based on dolphins, or at least her hair is. King Dorphin is a whale, Muzu a manta ray, and Prince Sidon is modeled after hammerhead sharks. There's also Tiba, who's based on hawks, and Kas, who's modeled after macaws. Initially, the horse god Melania was supposed to have a design more similar to the other four fairies around Hyrule. However, as Melania offers an entirely different service, this would have been an odd fit. Even when you're at the horse god fountain, you can hear the fairy theme kind of remixed with the Lon Lon Ranch theme. So instead of making this another fifth fairy, they gave the horse god a horse head and designed the stables around the overworld to pay homage to this deity. While a blood moon approaches, if you collect a Korok seed and let it hold on the text box screen, the sky will return to normal and the ominous music will subside. But of course, this doesn't fake out the blood moon. Once you exit the menu, it'll still pick up right where it left off. The Lord of the Mountains spawns randomly atop Satori Mountain during times with crescent moons. In case you weren't aware, Satori Mountain is named after the late Nintendo president Satoru Iwata, who passed away partway through the development on the 11th of July 2015. After his death, the team at Nintendo said that they could feel his spirit watching over them, which is referenced when the NPC Botrick at Outskirts Stable tells you about a glowing forest spirit who watches over Hyrule with a benevolent eye. Not a ghoulish micromanaging one. I paraphrased. As a way to pay homage, the team named Satori Mountain after him and made it one of the most beautiful and bountiful locations on the map. Now, I checked the records for the day Iwata died, and the day before was a third quarter moon, meaning exactly half of the moon was showing. Later in the month, on the 18th, was a new moon, no moon showing. That means on the night of the 11th of July 2015 in Japan, there would have been a little piece taken out of the moon, the first night of a waning crescent moon. I was blown away to see that his connection to the Lord of the Mountain ran that deep. And on that note, although Botrick, while he isn't named after him, does resemble Iwata, and it all ties together with the fact that Satori is the Japanese word for enlightenment, and his name, Satoru, is the verb form, to enlighten or to realize. So anytime you're over there, you're literally roaming around on Enlightenment Mountain. The starting point for Breath of the Wild's visual design came from the cartoony, cel-shaded visuals of Wind Waker HD, but obviously those were too stylized. Now, if you're unfamiliar with cel shading, it's a non-photorealistic rendering style, and I talk about it more in the 30-minute video. For Breath of the Wild, Nintendo wanted players to make connections based on things they knew they could do in real life. So the art style needed to have a certain level of realism, but they still used cel shading to not go too far in that direction. Now, before diving into the research for this video, I thought you always got extremely cartoony visuals like Wind Waker with cel-shaded games, but the end result in Breath of the Wild is information-dense art with rich detail that comes off as realistic in general, but also has those stylized elements to help keep things light and playful. For example, the realistic-looking wildlife transforming into a perfectly cut piece of meat when you go hunting is one of the ways the game cleverly blended these two elements. Link can do the moonwalk like a really bad Michael Jackson impersonator if you set the proper camera angle and quickly flick the control stick back and forth in the correct direction fast enough. It's barely worth it, but it's kinda cool if you figure it out. It's funny. This is Frida, a carnivorous Rito visiting Gerudo Town who particularly craves the taste of poultry. Yeah, that's right, Frida speaks openly and freely about her cannibalistic diet, and I must acknowledge how messed up that is. But then again, how is that any different from the Gorons? They're rock people who also feed on rocks, aren't they? But in searching to confirm conclusively that Gorons got the name rock people because they're made of rock, not just because they look like rocks or because they eat rocks, I could not find absolution. As little as 5 in-game minutes sleeping in a comfy bed will fully replenish Link's hearts, but the Shrine of Resurrection took 100 years to get him back up to 3. Let that sink in. That's about 8.5 years in the Shrine Bath to regain each quarter heart. Comfy beds are OP in this game, and if you look at the location outside Fort Hateno where Link fell and Zelda realized her powers, the Dueling Peaks stable is much closer than the Shrine of Resurrection. In fact, it's on the way. I say take him there, lay him down in a soft bed, get him back to work tomorrow. Better yet, if anyone had a fairy handy, was there ever a hylian on the brink of death that a fairy couldn't revive? Carrying Link to the Shrine of Resurrection from Fort Hateno would have been a huge task, but the guards apparently had help from Robbie and Purah. Once you have a horse registered, if you take it out and tame a random wild horse in front of it, hop off, whistle to call your horse, then immediately mount the new horse again, your original horse will follow you around as if it's jealous of the attention you're giving the new guy, or maybe it's just being super loyal by never giving up attempting to come after you've called by whistling. The platform where you find the Master Sword is a triangle, and the pedestal itself is a smaller triangle upside down raised up in the center. If you were to take this smaller triangle and expand it to fit the rest of the platform, it would make a Triforce. There's an easy to miss tucked away little chicken coop in Hateno Village that you can put the cuckoos into, and once you put a bird in the pen, you cannot take it out. They can come out on their own, and I do have one other thing I want to mention about cuckoos at the end of the video, but for right now, I'll also just let you know that they crow at daybreak. Some of you pointed out how the rubber helm is shaped like the giant Zora's domain fish, and I can't deny the uncanny resemblance, but if I'm gonna go that far, may I also present Magikarp for review? You know, maybe it's a bit of a stretch. If after activating Vomido, instead of doing anything, you just immediately go and check on Tiba to make sure that he's okay after getting shot, you'll catch the closest thing to cursing I've seen in any Zelda game as he exclaims, "Damn it," in pain. The strap across Link's chest is permanent after picking up a weapon or shield, unless you put on your Wind Waker lobster PJs, but he'll still wear the strap under the shirt, because it's still there. Every tower seems high when you climb from the base, but the elevation difference between the tallest and the lowest towers is staggering. All 15 in order from lowest to highest goes number 15. The Dueling Peaks is the lowest of the low, followed by number 14, the Central Tower, which is only a little bit taller. And then number 13 is the Great Plateau, which is somewhat significantly taller, but you can still grab on partway up the side. Number 12, the Pharaon Tower, is about as much taller than the Great Plateau as the Central Tower is over Dueling Peaks. And the same thing with the Lake Tower over Pharaon to take the 11th spot. And heading into the top 10 tallest towers. Number 10, Lanayru. You can grab on partway up if BLSSing straight over from the Lake Tower. Then number 9, Ridgeland, which is where this tier list started running into a bit of an unloaded tower issue, but it made for a cool visual. Ridgeland is only ever so slightly lower in elevation than number 8, the Hitano Tower. Then comes number 7, the Woodland. Approaching this one too quickly results in a significant lack of loading, possibly due to the Lost Woods and the castle taking priority. Unloaded towers look pretty cool, by the way. The platforms usually come in first, then the core and the top, and finally the climbable mesh detail. You can get a good look at some unloaded towers if you BLSS around from one to the next fast enough. That said, moving up to number 6, to Bantha Tower is the most significant height increase. It's where the cold barrier begins, and it's one of only 2 where you can't just BLSS and hit the tower to grab on. You have to stop short of it and climb the whole thing. After that, you can go around these mountains here to number 5, the Gerudo, and then make a straight shot across the map over here to number 4, Eldin. Eldin Tower is just above the peak of the castle. And for the top 3 tallest, we have number 3, Hebra, followed in only the tiniest bit of extra height to barely snag the number 2 spot, the Wasteland Tower. And finally, at number 1, Akala is by far the highest in elevation. There is no contest. The difference between the highest and lowest is insanely impressive. Akala Tower towers over Dueling Peaks Tower, and even barely clears the Dueling Peaks themselves. It puts it in perspective how immense this map is when you BLSS over and pass like this. The Dueling Peaks Tower seems so far away, it's almost like how could that little thing all the way down there possibly have had a good vantage point at the beginning of the game for unlocking a considerable chunk of the map? But it totally does. The one-hit obliterator has the divine beast heads at the tip of each prong if you look closely. Ruda, Rudanya, Noboris, Meadow. And the text around the base of the pedestal where you find it says, "Take it." Each of the 4 champion amiibo figures have a cool, iconic cinematic pose that they strike, right? Well, we get to see the story behind how each one of these poses came to be in the events leading up to and immediately following in each one of the Champion Ballad DLC cutscenes. People claim this game has a weak story, but I think it's just because it's all Tarantino'd up and mixed up for everyone in a different way, and also because the story already happened, you're not actively progressing it forward. It's 100 years ago, but the story itself is the closest thing to an actual legend about Zelda herself as far as I've seen. The DLC cutscene with Urbosa can make you cry. There are 900 Koroks around the overworld, but you can glitch things up to get as many as 999. Well, really, you can glitch things so you could just keep on getting as many as you want infinitely. Still, in the loading menu screen, once you pass 900, it'll only go as high as that. And for every siege you pass after 900 cumulatively collected, you'll get a little message about how you should go see Hetsu. If you get to the castle fast enough, you can make your way to places that are supposed to be covered in malice before the malice loads. Most of these areas will perpetually deal damage until you just get out of the puddle, but if you make your way over to this spiral stairway, you can get horribly soft-locked in a pocket between the upper and lower entrance. I even got an autosave in this little trap and had to leave the castle just to get out. There are 2 bird statues on the Great Plateau facing northeast. They're absolutely identical all the way down to the fine patterns of wind damage. Literally a copy and paste job. There are 2 more bird statues at Hyrule Castle, and they're not exact copies. one has fallen apart much more significantly. Generally speaking, the statues at the plateau have more feminine features, whereas the ones at Castle are more masculine, and both sets stand above the main entryway to their respective areas and face more or less towards one another. The castle obviously has a main entry, but you may not know about the plateaus. There's a main entryway here covered in dirt. It's the only one like it around the whole accessible base of the plateau, and up top, this path seems to lead to where the door would be, which makes this part of the Great Plateau extremely reminiscent of the Castletown area from Ocarina of Time. There's this fountain here, which in Ocarina of Time acts as the camera point. If you recreate this viewpoint, you can see the Temple of Time in the background lines up decently enough to see how developers may have been inspired and where the castle coulda, woulda, shoulda been. You can also get a bit closer to the Temple of Time to visualize that camera shot for entering or exiting in Ocarina, and this broken bridge is highly reminiscent of the gate on the path to Hyrule Castle. I've flown past this spot hundreds of times and only recently noticed the uncanny resemblances. When starting from a complete standstill, if you head forward or to the right, Link will always begin by stepping with his left leg. However, if you head to the left, Link will step off with his right leg first. If you do a quick 180 to head the opposite direction, Link will always step off with whichever leg he turns from. Unless you're holding ZL, in which case he'll always start moving with his right leg no matter which direction you go, forward, right, back, or left. To go right, he takes a short step with his right leg first, and to go left, he crosses his right leg all the way over. The boat lift smuggle slide does not require stamina to pull off, unlike other glitches for faster movement to get around. That means not only can you travel across the map without using any stamina, you can do so in a state of completely depleted stamina the entire time. And if you do so, Link's exhausted facial expression looks like he's screaming in that typical Link style, you know, or whatever. BLSS, by the way, works completely differently with zero arrows, and by that I mean it barely works at all. For those of you who know how to do a regular BLSS, if you think the controls are squirrely and wonky now, try it without any arrows in your inventory and see how much disaster moving around can be. All 120 shrines can be broadly broken into 3 categories based on the virtues from the Triforce. It's either some form of puzzle solving, wisdom, a challenge and or adventure to even get inside, where upon entry you're gifted a spirit orb, or your courage, or they have you facing a test of physical strength and combat prowess. Power. Unfortunately, this does not break down to an even and psychologically satisfying 40-40-40. Most are puzzles, and there are only 20 tests of strength. Once activated, the Divine Beasts stand by aiming their lasers at the castle, right? In order from highest to lowest elevation of their vantage points, Vah Rudania is the highest, then Vah Medoh, then Vah Naboris, and lowest is Vah Ruda. So Medoh, Naboris, and Ruda are all generally around the same elevation, while Rudania is significantly higher all the way up at the top of Death Mountain, which, as I've already stated, is the highest traversable point of the map during regular play. And the elevation you're at, standing atop the tallest tower I mentioned earlier, Akala, is about the same elevation as Medoh's laser. I'm sure this also works when you're fighting the Blight Ganons on their turf, but if you go straight to the Sanctum and beat them up over there are these Phase 1 and Phase 2, and when Phase 1 completes, there's an unskippable cutscene that'll play before Phase 2 begins. And during this cutscene, for whatever reason, developers chose to hide Link while it plays, so he's always invisible. However, if you finish Phase 1 with a swing attack that leaves a trail of wind behind it, like a downward vertical slash for example, the swing of your weapon will still be visible, and it'll flash as if the game knows it's not supposed to be seen, so it keeps clearing it, but something about the wind trail overrides this command, so it keeps popping back up, or something like that. Enemies can be damaged during cutscenes. The only problem is that you can't control Link during cutscenes, so you can't deal damage to enemies anyway. Or can you? Speedrunners already know about a cool and precise trick called Wind Blight or Calamity Skip, where you can destroy them with a single arrow shot right before you walk into the cutscene zone of the Sanctum. I won't explain the particulars of setting up an enemy skip here, obviously that's too useful for this series, but it is cool to see a skip performed with elemental or ancient arrows. The different effects that come off in the animations really make it look like some sort of twisted fireworks display. Riju's throne room has a runner rug that comes up the steps to her throne, and it's held in place at the creases with decorative stair rods that are bolted in place to the floor so that the rug stays in place along the steps instead of being a sloping tripping hazard. The throne itself has a silhouette of a sand seal at the base of the backrest, and her pillows also have the face of a sand seal sewn into the design. When you think about it, these moblins and Lizalfos locked up in the castle's basement have presumably been down here since before Calamity took over. They were apparently captured and imprisoned to be used as gladiator-style combat for training purposes of the soldiers and potential knights of Hyrule. So why wouldn't they be freed when Calamity rose to power? It's been a century. How long can Moblins and Lizalfos go without a meal? Do they keep on starving down here and then get reanimated every time a blood moon happens to stay trapped down here for eternity? Forgotten by their leader? Literally serving multiple life sentences incarcerated. Yikes. Also, these passageways would need to be wider for a Stalnox to walk down, so how'd this monster get into this room? It may have been lowered from above as shown in concept art from creating a champion where this opening leads to the surface. In the game, however, this loading dock is completely absent from where it's supposed to be, and on the same thread, if all that wasn't enough, there's this poor little Lizalfos stuck inside the wall with no way out. For anyone's guess, this thing was sealed up in here during the castle's construction. There's no logical explanation for how Lizalfos could get sealed up into a wall like this. Breath of the Wild's internal project name was U-King. This is known because the executable binary is called U-King, and numerous other assets refer to the game as U-King. From what I can see, there was a rumor at one point that the game's title could have been The Legend of Zelda Unbound King, but it could be that this codename was suggesting that Breath of the Wild was created by Nintendo to be the king of all Wii U games. One way to cook a campfire egg is by roasting it over a campfire. Duh, but you can also get a campfire egg by cooking it with a beam of laser. Why eggs work this way must have something to do with their unique properties in the bird egg code, because all other inventory items I tried get entirely no reaction at all. The beam even goes straight through bundles of wood, so it's not the game's most impressively realistic feature as far as the physics engine is concerned. And the physics in this game are highly regarded by Zelda enthusiasts. Developing the physics engine is also one of the biggest reasons for why the game wasn't released earlier than it was. But when you think about the sheer brute strength required to parry attacks from, say, Calamity Ganon or a charging Lionel, it's pretty outrageous what Link can do sometimes. For example, to dead stop and recoil backwards a charging silver Lionel with a single shield parry is insane. Fellow Zelda YouTuber Zeltic once calculated that a silver Lionel weighs approximately 4,000 kilograms and travels 22.4 meters per second during its charge attack. So to not only instantly stop one dead in its tracks without backing up at all, because Link stays solidly planted to the ground as he parries, but to also start the process of pushing it back in the opposite direction requires about 448,000 newtons of force. That ferocious stopping power is equivalent to what's needed to propel a small rocket into orbit. Contrary to popular belief, you can leave the Great Plateau before you get the paraglider. The easiest way to do this is to BLSS from somewhere on the plateau out over the southern corner of Lake Colomo. Before BLSS was discovered, you'd have to do this by stasising this door and sending it out into the overworld, which was a lot harder. You can survive the fall by either landing in the water or doing a fall damage cancel close to the shore. If done correctly, you'll be able to explore Hyrule a tiny bit before you're supposed to be able to, because the game is coded extremely strictly and constantly checks to make sure you have the paraglider. So if it notices that you don't and you're not on the plateau, it sends you straight back. While you're down here, you can see the fog surrounding the plateau until you complete it. This fog is the first barrier that knows to respawn you back to where Link was last known to be touching the ground. A second barrier covers the whole rest of the map before completing the plateau. If this barrier catches you, it'll send you all the way back to the entrance of the Shrine of Resurrection, which, by the way, if you've left by clipping out to avoid the opening cutscene and you approach from the outside, when you get close to the front door, that iconic scene of Link viewing the overworld will kick in, except Link will be absent, probably if he gets stuck on something or whatever, you know? And if you've completed the plateau, the old man will not be seen in this scene, if you know what I mean. And if you complete the first 4 shrines without activating the Great Plateau Tower, and then activate the tower before grabbing the paraglider, there will be this invisible box around the tower preventing you from leaving. You must talk to the old man down below on the ground. But since the game doesn't understand why you did the shrines before you did the tower as directed, you'll see the paraglider on the ground for a moment, and then the old man will be invisible. In December 2019, the official storyboard drawings and notes for the opening cutscene where Link runs out of the Shrine of Resurrection and we see the overworld for the first time was released on Twitter. Storyboarding, in case you're not aware, is an early step of the animation process that was developed originally by Disney in the 1930s, where you draw the keyframes or the main beats of the animation, and then it's easier to fill in the parts between to bring the characters and scenes to life. Here we see as the player first heads out of the cave and it switches from gameplay to demo, which developers noted wanted to be a seamless transition. Then the second one lines up as he's still running partway to the edge of the cliff, and the third depicts as he slows down and approaches the overlook spot. And then finally we see him looking out at the world with what they call a crane zoom in as the title of the game displays on the screen. One major difference here is that in the sketches it's big across the center, but in the finished product the title is in the bottom right corner. Alright, this next one is puerile, I know, but still the game has Koroks pooping right in front of you and then giving it to you, meaning number 2 is officially in the game. And that's been confirmed since 2018 by director Hidemaro Fubayashi in an interview, by the way, so I can include a useless bit of information about number 1. While there is no actual number 1 in this game, the closest you can get is to go inside the Shoraha Shrine. Stand in front of one of these fountains with the camera angled correctly, voila, there you go. Well, there Link goes. When you go into the options for styling your horse's mane, there's a regular braided and a French braided option. The implication here being that France somehow exists in the world of Zelda, which it shouldn't, so how does that style of braid make it here? I'm not sure exactly how this works, but something to do with either the cooldown after taking damage or going into a ragdoll state or something like that. But whatever the explanation, the cooldown timer on your bombs rune is perfectly timed to blow Link up as soon as he stands up from being blown up by your other bombs rune. And while he may take a quarter heart of damage here and there from tumbling around after the explosion while in the ragdoll state, he will not take any damage from any other subsequent explosions after that first one. You can just keep blowing him up all day long, he'll be fine. The Goron City theme has hints of the original Legend of Zelda Death Mountain theme slowed down. It's a lot more intense in the original, but that's because it's only heard in the final dungeon, making it an easy reference to miss. And yeah, that's right, in the original you face off with Ganon at Death Mountain, and you enter from Spectacle Rock. Spectacle Rock, located in the mountain ranges that separate Gerudo from the rest of the map in Breath of the Wild, is named because it's shaped like a pair of glasses, spectacles being an old-fashioned word for vision-correcting glasses. This place has been in 3 previous Zelda games, the original, The Adventure of Link, and A Link to the Past. In other words, the first 3 games to come out. In those older titles, Spectacle Rock was always located in the Death Mountain area, but obviously not in this title. Although, on the official Nintendo UK website in 2016, they said that this is the same Spectacle Rock as seen in the original Legend of Zelda, which, if you played that game, you may remember its significance is that it's the entrance to the final dungeon where you face off with Ganon. In Breath of the Wild, it's the location of the Wasteland Tower and Vana Boris's vantage point once activated. However, if we were able to find an entrance to a dungeon leading to Ganon's lair a la the original, we could expect to find a bombable wall of boulders somewhere around this general area. But the final fight in this game starts at Hyrule Castle and ends out in the field, not underground in Ganon's lair. Still, then again, we never actually see Ganon or Ganondorf in Breath of the Wild, just the full Malice Dark Beast Ganon or part Malice, part Sheikah technology fused incarnations and Calamity and the Blight quadruplets, all of which are essentially puppets on strings anyway. Think about it. In every other Zelda game, or at least ones where Ganon's the final boss, doesn't he have to be slain with the Master Sword and or some special arrows, typically silver or light? Then and only then he's weakened enough for the seal deal, right? But not in Breath of the Wild. The Master Sword exists, but it's optional. Bow of Light exists, but it's also optional. How does that work? Well, you can omit using the Bow of Light to defeat Dark Beast Ganon by using beams from the Master Sword instead, which totally makes sense. Or you can use Ancient Arrows, which really surprised me to be honest. And you can also use Urbosa's Fury, which seems insane to me, like why should that stuff work? But it totally does. What I'm getting at here is that the two big, long-running traditional weapons for Ganon disposal, the special sword and the special bow, are 100% optional in this game. It shows that obviously there's more story to tell, there always has been. And while calling the information in this series useless, I've still always aimed for it to be as accurate and as entertaining as possible. Thanks to your help, I've finally realized that it is indeed possible to do a flyby over the top of Death Mountain and drop a Kuko directly into the center. I did it with the moon jump glitch, and the secret is that you have to deactivate Rivali's Gale first, then grab a Kuko of your choice and walk hop your way over to Death Mountain, which takes a little while because you have to go at a walking pace, but the view from up here is almost enough to make it worth it. And once you got a good spot, you can reactivate Rivali's Gale, and your next hop will drop the Kuko right down into the main vent of the volcano, which was not nearly as cool as the magnificent views I saw on the way over. I want to thank you so much one last time for your support of this ridiculous series. This channel is going to be covering a lot of Tears of the Kingdom stuff coming up, so subscribe to catch those videos as they come out. And until then, stay well, stay cool, and always keep punching out there. Aloha.